Data East. Data bloody East. What do you think about them? Because, honestly, I don't know. They've always struck me as one of the fairly odd companies from the big old 80s arcade era. I mean, even though they made predominantly side-scrolling action titles, just look at some of them. They made Bad Dudes, undoubtedly the B-moviest of all B-movie games, kicking the crap out of ninjas, rescuing Ronald Reagan, and generally being alpha as fuck. You notice how the dudes pointedly don't join Ronnie for a burger at the end? Can't deal with those bad carbs, bruh. They also made Sly Spy, a rather memorable James Bond knockoff, kind of like Bad Dudes on the whole, only with more guns, scuba kits and parachutes. And of course they made Karnov. Karnov was virtually Data East's mascot. Most company mascots are designed to appeal to a fairly wide audience. They might have a bit of an edge, an ever so dirty smile or that come hither look that entices you towards their games, but they're not too offensive to look at generally. The same can't really be said for a grotesquely fat fire-breathing Russian. Data East were sort of amongst the top companies of the era, but in other ways they were decidedly not. They've always reminded me actually of some sort of schlocky direct-to-video film company. They certainly weren't any strangers to either flat-out weirdness or controversy. Despite that, they definitely have their fair share of gems. There's Burger Time, a wholly weird game in its own right, but clearly one of their most famous classic titles. Nothing like running around a stage making burgers, it prepares you for what you'll be doing when you grow up. Their name was on Karate Champ, one of the first proper one-on-one beat-em-ups ever made. Technos actually made the game, but naturally Data East put their name front and centre. And, more personal to me I suppose, they made Atomic Runner, which for me is their greatest game. An absolute barnstormer of an action title, a real underrated gem, and, most importantly, the game we're talking about in this video today. So, let's go. The game itself has quite an odd history. Originally released for the arcades as Chelnov in 1988, the plot, such as it was, involves a coal miner who miraculously survives a nuclear explosion, becomes the radioactive man, and is then asked if he's a bad enough dude to take down the secret organisation that caused said explosion. This plot did not go down too well for one rather large reason. The disaster at Chernobyl that occurred about 18 months previously clearly inspired the game somewhat. Chelnov merely sounds fairly similar to Chernobyl in English, but in Japanese it's virtually identical, and the presence of a hammer and sickle doesn't help much either. Data East obviously had some sort of fascination with Russia, and they tried to ward off any controversy by claiming that Chelnov was actually a relative of Karnov's, and that the game was not in any way whatsoever related to Chernobyl at all. No siree. The only trouble with that statement was that it was quite clearly a load of old bollocks. People naturally questioned the taste of making this sort of action game that was clearly inspired by a real-life disaster, the fallout from which, if you'll pardon the pun, was still being felt even 18 months later. Mind you, I don't want to talk too much about the arcade game. It's certainly good despite its insensitivity, but the Mega Drive version's the one I really know. Of course, the title changed from Chelnov to Atomic Runner in most places, and the plot changed too. You now play a young scientist who has to rescue his sister from another secret organisation who's just killed your dad, and so you don a special combat suit that looks somewhat similar to the arcade game's Radioactive Man. The graphics have also changed too. Frankly, they've changed for the better. The arcade Atomic Runner is kind of odd in that it features generally industrial locales, but most of the enemies don't really fit it. They're somewhat fantastical and exotic, in fact. Wind monsters, big dragons, gigantic tribal wood carvings. The game's art is, to be honest, a little confused. The Mega Drive version's art just fits more. The industrial backgrounds are largely replaced, and there's a definite ancient relics theme running through the whole game. This is definitely one of those times when the console lords it over the arcade. The graphics are so much more interesting to look at, they fit the theme better, and the music's a hell of a lot better too, mainly because there's a lot more of it. Aside from that, the gameplay is largely the same. As the title suggests, you have to run. You only stop moving for bosses. The rest of the time you scroll forward no matter what. A jumps, B fires, and C turns the one left and right. Pressing a button to turn is perhaps the toughest part to master here. It doesn't necessarily feel right when you begin, and I've scorched certain games for doing such things in the past, Sword of Sodan for example. However, it's an absolute necessity here. The amount of enemies coming at you means you'll often need to fire in front while moving back. Because make no mistake, this game is really hard. Some say it's too hard. I've seen that complaint thrown at the game, that it's frustrating and unfair and all that palaver. Of course, being hard isn't at all a negative around these parts, so long as you're hard for the right reasons, and Atomic Runner most definitely is. Yeah, it's a tough game, but it's usually always your fault when you die. Okay, there are some rather cheap enemies, the guys who throw their shield at you for example, but so long as you keep calm and don't get all angry game rage, that'll only catch you out once. Look, you may as well just face it, kid. You're gonna die.
Hey ho, I'll just load state and try that again. Shit.
The game does give you plenty of opportunities though. The Yankee Doodle Dandy version hands out a 15 continue maximum like it's bloody candy or something. Data East had a little more respect for Europeans, so we only get 5. Enough to get through the game, but only after you've persevered with it. Really, there's nothing too outrageous about the difficulty. It's old school, the way games used to be. And when you get zoned into this game, it's a bloody joy. Atomic Runner is actually a bit of a hybrid. It's a run and gun, but the emphasis, surprisingly enough, is on gun. The game rewards accuracy, firing off choice salvos and getting rid of enemies as quickly as possible, in much the same way as you would in a plain old everyday shmup. The power-ups are also rather similar to those you'd get in a shooter, upgradable weapons and power-ups that improve your movement and range. The forced running and auto-scroll may be a very important part of the game, but it's more like the game's gimmick. The real meat is in dodging bullets and placing your shots, just as you would in a serious shooter. The bosses hammer this point home too, with tiny weak spots and an emphasis on well thought out strategy, quite a lot like the original Shinobi in fact. You don't really get far in this game by just blasting away blindly, is what I'm saying. It's just so damn exciting as well. The animation adds a lot just because it's so fluid. It makes it so damn awesome to leap and somersault your way around all of these goons. There'll be so many moments just through playing that'll simply take your breath away. You'll suddenly gasp and think, holy crap, did I just do that? The sort of feeling that's always quite rewarding in a game as tough as this one. There's nothing like being trapped right on the edge of the screen and somehow, some way, clearing a path. Yeah, it doesn't always happen, but, well, you're one man against a million robots, beasts, and God only knows what else.
Atomic Runner is definitely one of the better games you can get for your Mega Drive or Genesis console. And as you know, there's a lot of bloody good action titles to be found there. And it's cheap as chips too. You can easily pick it up and not even spend a tenner. So, you know, what are you waiting for? It's an underrated title, an overlooked gem, a forgotten classic. You know, you should be going out and buying it right now. In the words of the map screen, let's go go! And with that, it's time to end the video. So thanks for watching, and wherever you are, whoever you be, have a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.